The gravel crunched under my heels as I stepped out of the Bentley, the sleek black car gleaming under the Chicago streetlights. My family stood frozen on the front lawn, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief. My mother, Diane, clutched her wine glass, her lips parted mid-sentence. My brother, Lucas, let his smirk falter, his Porsche keys dangling uselessly in his hand. My father, Robert, just stared, eyes wide, like he was seeing me for the first time. I smoothed my navy dress, looked straight at them and said, "You gave me a voucher. I gave myself a future." The air felt electric, like the world had paused to watch. But let me take you back to where it all began. My 21st birthday, the day they tried to erase me. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated with all our latest stories. Your support means the world. If you find this video valuable, give it a like. I'd love to hear where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. Now let's dive into the story. It was supposed to be a milestone. Turning 21, stepping into adulthood, the kind of day you imagine with at least a card, maybe a smile. But in my family, I'd learned to expect less. Still, some naive part of me hoped. I stood in our suburban Chicago living room, the same beige walls and stiff furniture I'd grown up with, holding an envelope Diane had just handed me. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like it was pulling me through the floor. Inside was a one-way train voucher to Seattle. No note, no explanation, just a departure time for tomorrow morning. I looked up at Diane, her arms crossed, that smug tilt to her lips she wore when she thought she'd outsmarted someone. "You're an adult now," she said, her voice sharp, like she was dismissing a stranger. "Be grateful." Outside, Lucas was already in the driveway, revving the engine of his brand new Porsche, his 21st birthday gift. The car was a glossy red, custom rims glinting in the sunlight, a monument to everything my parents poured into him. He caught my eye through the window and grinned, tossing out, "Better than nothing, right, Scarlett?" His laugh stung, a blade wrapped in casual cruelty. I opened my mouth, then closed it. What could I say? That I'd spent years fading into the background, tiptoeing around Diane's moods, shrinking so Lucas could shine? That I'd stayed up late applying to online courses, saving every penny from freelance design gigs, because I knew they'd never support me? The words choked in my throat, so I just nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "Thanks." Diane raised an eyebrow, her expression unchanged. "Most kids would kill for a fresh start," she said, as if I'd been handed a golden ticket instead of a shove out the door. My hands trembled, clutching the voucher, not from fear but from a sick mix of shame and rage. My heart pounded, drowning out the world. I wanted to scream, to tear the voucher into pieces, but I didn't. I couldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I turned, my legs moving on autopilot, and headed upstairs. Behind me, I heard Diane mutter to Robert, who'd been silent by the couch, "This cleans up our mess, doesn't it?" Her words landed like a punch, hinting at something colder, something planned. Robert didn't answer, just flipped through his newspaper, avoiding my gaze like always. In my room, I sat on the edge of my bed, the voucher still in my hand. The silence was loud, broken only by the faint hum of Lucas's car outside. My posters, my books, the quilt I'd picked out at 16. They all felt foreign now, like relics of a girl who'd tried too hard to belong. I stared at the wall, my mind racing but numb. Was I angry? Hurt? Done? Maybe all of it. But something shifted in that moment, a spark igniting in the dark. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to leave, and they'd never see me the same again. I held the voucher, wondering if I'd ever matter to them, and whispered to myself, "This isn't the end. It's the start." The moonlight slipped through the cracked blinds of my childhood bedroom, casting pale stripes across the carpet. I sat on the floor, my suitcase open beside me, its emptiness mirroring the hollow ache in my chest. The train voucher lay on my bed, a cruel bookmark for the end of this chapter. I packed slowly, deliberately, as if folding each shirt could delay the inevitable. Clothes, my laptop, a worn sketchbook, the essentials of a life I'd have to rebuild alone. My fingers brushed against something tucked inside the sketchbook, a faded Polaroid of me and Lucas, maybe 7 and 9, grinning at a county fair, cotton candy staining our lips. For a moment, I was that girl again, believing my big brother might protect me. The memory stung, sharp and fleeting, like a paper cut. I shoved the photo back, my resolve hardening. That Scarlet was gone. The one packing now had no room for nostalgia. I moved to my dresser, pulling out the small notebook I'd kept hidden behind it. Inside were scribbled plans, online courses, freelance gigs, a budget scratched out in pencil. It was my lifeline, proof I'd been preparing for a future my family never cared to imagine for me. I tucked it into my bag, zipping the suitcase shut with a finality that echoed in the quiet room. The clock on my nightstand ticked toward midnight, each second pulling me closer to departure. I didn't sleep. How could I? My mind churned with images of Diane's smug face, Lucas's taunting grin, Robert's silence. But beneath the hurt, a spark flickered. Defiance, maybe, or something stronger. I wasn't just leaving. I was choosing myself. Morning came too fast. The sun rose, painting the room in soft gold, at odds with the weight in my bones. I stood, smoothing my hoodie, and grabbed my suitcase. The house was silent as I crept downstairs, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. Diane was at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, a mug of black coffee steaming beside her. She didn't look up. "Train's at 8, she muttered, her voice flat, like she was reminding me to take out the trash. I waited, foolishly, for something more, a glance, a goodbye, a flicker of regret. Nothing. Robert was already gone, off to work, dodging the mess like always. Lucas's Porsche gleamed in the driveway, a silent taunt. No one came to see me off. I stepped outside, the crisp Chicago air biting my cheeks, and let the door click shut behind me. It wasn't my home anymore. The train station was a blur of noise and motion, commuters rushing, announcements crackling overhead. I stood on the platform, my suitcase at my feet, the voucher crumpled in my pocket. The Amtrak loomed, its silver cars stretching into the distance, a beast ready to carry me to a city I'd never seen. I boarded, finding a window seat, and hugged my backpack to my chest. The train lurched forward, the platform slipping away, and with it, the life I'd known. I didn't cry, though the ache in my throat begged me to. Instead, I pulled out my sketchbook, flipping to a blank page. My pencil moved almost on its own, tracing the outline of a city skyline, sharp and bold, with a single figure standing tall in the foreground. It was me, or who I wanted to be. The landscape blurred outside the window, fields giving way to suburbs, then open plains. I thought about Seattle, a place that existed only in my imagination, full of possibility and risk. Could I make it there with no one to catch me if I fell? The question gnawed at me, but the answer was already forming, quiet but certain. I'd have to. The voucher wasn't a gift. It was a challenge, and I'd meet it head-on. As the train rumbled west, I closed my sketchbook, the figure in my drawing a little clearer now. Could I really start over? I leaned against the window, the glass cool against my cheek, and let the question linger, knowing the answer would come with time. Seattle greeted me with rain, a soft drizzle that clung to my hoodie as I stepped off the train. The city buzzed with life, towering buildings, coffee shops on every corner, the hum of possibility in the air. I dragged my suitcase through the wet streets, my heart a mix of nerves and hope. I'd found a tiny studio above a coffee shop called The Daily Grind, advertised online for cheap. The owner, Elena, met me at the door, her warm smile cutting through the gray. "You look like you could use a coffee," she said, handing me a steaming mug before I'd even set my bag down. Her kindness was a lifeline, and when she offered me a part-time barista job, I grabbed it like a drowning person clings to driftwood. My days fell into a rhythm. Mornings at the coffee shop, steaming milk and chatting with regulars, afternoons hunched over my laptop, chasing freelance design gigs. I'd enrolled in online marketing courses, my screen glowing late into the night as I studied branding and ad strategies. It wasn't glamorous. My studio smelled of espresso and had a creaky floor, but it was mine. I pinned my train voucher to the wall, Not as a wound, but a reminder. I'd made it this far. Then came Naomi, a startup founder who'd hired me for a logo project. She was sharp, direct, with a laugh that filled the room. "You've got grit, Scarlett," she said after I delivered the design early. She offered me a contract role in her company's brand strategy, a chance to build something real. For the first time, I felt seen, like my work mattered. But just as I started to find my footing, Lucas struck. I'd been scrolling through social media one evening, avoiding the usual family posts, when I saw it, a cryptic story from him, a photo of his Porsche with the caption, "Some people fake their way up. Truth always comes out." My stomach twisted. I'd kept my head down, but Lucas hadn't forgotten me. Days later, an email hit my inbox, a major client, one I'd spent weeks pitching, canceling our contract. "We've heard concerns about your reliability," they wrote. No details, just a polite brush-off. I called a friend from the project, desperate for answers. "Word got around," she said, hesitating. "Your brother's been talking, saying you're unstable." "I'm sorry, Scarlett." The room spun. Lucas had reached across the miles, poisoning my fresh start with lies. I sat on my bed, the voucher staring at me from the wall. My savings were thin. Rent, courses, and groceries had eaten through what little I'd brought. Losing that client meant I might not make next month's rent. Doubt crept in, cold and heavy. Had I been naive to think I could outrun my family's shadow? I thought of Diane's smirk, Lucas's taunts, the way they'd dismissed me like I was nothing. No, I wouldn't let them win. I emailed Naomi, explaining the setback without mentioning Lucas. Her reply was instant. "Meet me tomorrow. We'll figure this out." The next morning, she didn't coddle me but handed me a new project, a rebrand for a local nonprofit. "Show them what you're made of," she said, her eyes steady. I nodded, my jaw tight, and got to work. Days turned into weeks. I poured myself into the project, sketching logos, drafting campaigns, staying up until dawn. Elena slipped me free coffee, sensing my stress but never prying. Slowly, I landed smaller gigs to replace the lost client, each one a brick in the wall I was building around my new life. But the ache lingered, not just from the money, but from Lucas's betrayal. He'd tried to break me, and he'd almost succeeded. I stared at my laptop, the nonprofit's logo glowing on the screen, and felt a flicker of pride. I was still here, still fighting. With my savings dwindling, could I recover from Lucas's betrayal? I closed my eyes, the rain tapping against my window, and knew I had to try. The buzz of my phone broke the quiet of my Seattle studio, the screen glowing with a text from Lucas. "Family reunion next weekend. Show up or don't. Your call." I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the reply button. 3 months had passed since I'd left Chicago, since the train voucher and their cold dismissal. I'd built something here, a job, a mentor, a fragile sense of self. But Lucas's message dragged me back to that house, to Diane's smirk and Robert's silence. I tossed the phone onto my bed, the voucher still pinned to my wall, catching my eye. Why now? What did they want? I paced the creaky floor, my heart thudding with a mix of anger and something I hated to admit, curiosity. I sank onto the couch, replaying the last few weeks. Naomi's nonprofit project had been a success, earning me a small bonus and her trust. But I was stretched thin, juggling barista shifts and a high-stakes pitch for a major client, a tech startup that could secure my career. The pitch was due the day after the reunion, and every spare moment was spent refining slides and practicing my delivery. Going to Chicago risked derailing it all. I'd nearly lost everything when Lucas sabotaged my last client. Could I afford another distraction? Yet the idea of facing them, of showing them I wasn't the invisible girl they'd discarded, burned in my chest. I didn't need their approval, but I wanted them to see what they'd lost. A call from my cousin Hannah tipped the scales. "Scarlett, you coming to the reunion?" she asked, her voice cautious. "Diane's been talking about you." I frowned, gripping the phone. "What's she saying?" Hannah hesitated. "She's telling everyone she gave you tough love to teach you independence. Like it was her plan all along." My blood ran hot. Diane was rewriting my exile as some noble act, erasing her cruelty to polish her image. The lie stung more than the voucher itself. She didn't get to claim credit for my survival. I thanked Hannah, hung up, and stared at my laptop, the pitch deck glaring back. The reunion wasn't just a chance to face them. It was a chance to set the record straight. I texted Naomi, my fingers trembling. Got a family thing in Chicago. Might need to make an entrance. Any chance I could borrow your driver? Her reply came in seconds. Bentley and Marcus are yours. Show them who you are. I exhaled, a smile tugging at my lips. Naomi didn't know the whole story, but she knew enough. The Bentley wasn't just a car. It was a statement, a way to walk back into their world on my terms. But doubt crept in. What if I went and they didn't care? What if I choked on my words, or worse, let them pull me back into their orbit? The pitch loomed, my career hanging in the balance. I couldn't afford to falter now. I stood, pacing again, the city lights flickering outside my window. Lucas's text glowed on my phone, his casual tone masking the challenge beneath. Show up or don't. He thought I'd slink back, broken or desperate, or not come at all. Diane thought she could spin her betrayal into a story of sacrifice. They were wrong. I wasn't going to beg or grovel. I was going to walk into that reunion with my head high, not to prove I was better than them, but to prove I was enough for myself. The pitch could wait one day. This couldn't. I typed a reply to Lucas, I'll be there. My finger hit send, and a weight lifted, replaced by a fire I hadn't felt before. Would my family see me, or would I crash and burn? I turned to my closet, already picturing the dress I'd wear, and knew I was ready to find out. The Seattle rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and the streets slick with reflected neon. I stood in a boutique tucked between a record store and a ramen shop, the kind of place that felt like a secret. Elena, my coffee shop boss turned friend, was with me, her eyes scanning racks of dresses. You need something that says, I'm not who you think, she said, pulling a navy gown from the display. It was sleek, with a fitted bodice and a subtle slit, bold but not flashy. I ran my fingers over the fabric, imagining Diane's face when I walked in. This is it, I said, my voice steady. Elena grinned. They won't know what hit them. Back in my studio, I laid the dress across my bed, its deep blue catching the light like a promise. My laptop sat open, the tech pitch deck glaring at me, a reminder of the risk I was taking. The reunion was tomorrow, and every hour spent preparing for it was an hour not spent polishing my presentation. But this wasn't just about showing up. It was about closing a chapter. I needed to be unshakable. I turned to my phone, scrolling through old voicemails, and froze. One from Diane, months old, unopened. Scarlett, you've always been difficult. Her voice hissed through the speaker, cold and blaming. Don't expect us to chase you. My thumb hovered over delete, my chest tight. Then I pressed it, the message vanishing. That was her weight, not mine. I was done carrying it. I stood before my mirror practicing. Not lines, but presence, shoulders back, chin up, eyes sharp. I wasn't the girl who'd clutched a train voucher, trembling in their living room. I was someone new, forged in Seattle's rain and late-night hustle. The dress would be my armor, the Bentley my chariot. I thought of Naomi, who'd handed me this chance without hesitation. Make them see you, she'd said. I would. Not for their approval, but to remind myself who I'd become. I paired the dress with simple silver hoops and black heels, keeping it elegant, untouchable. The mirror reflected a woman I was starting to recognize, one who didn't need their validation. The next morning, Marcus, Naomi's driver, pulled up outside the daily grind in the Bentley. The car was a sleek beast, black and gleaming, its tinted windows hiding the world. Elena peeked out from the shop, flashing a thumbs up. Own it, Scarlett, she called. I waved, my heart pounding, and slid into the back seat. The leather smelled rich, like ambition and old money, and soft jazz hummed through the speakers. Marcus, a broad-shouldered man with a warm laugh, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Big day, huh? He said. Family stuff's tricky, but you look like you're ready to rewrite the rulebook. I smiled, his words easing the knot in my stomach. That's the plan, I replied, smoothing my dress. Just get me there in one piece. We drove through Seattle, the city blurring past, coffee shops, ferries, the Space Needle piercing the sky. Marcus shared a story about his own family, a sister he hadn't spoken to in years, and how he'd learned to let go. "Sometimes you gotta show up for you, not them," he said. I nodded, his words sinking in. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. My phone buzzed. Lucas texting, "Hope you're not late." I ignored it, picturing his smug grin, Diane's crossed arms, Robert's distant stare. They thought they knew me, thought I'd crumble or crawl back. They were wrong. The Bentley's engine purred, carrying me toward Chicago, toward a moment I'd been building since the day I left. As the city faded and the highway stretched ahead, I leaned back, my pulse steady. Was I ready for war? The dress hugged my frame, the voucher burned in my memory, and I knew I was more than ready. The Bentley rolled to a stop in front of my childhood home, the tires crunching on the familiar gravel driveway. The Chicago evening was cool, the white siding of the house glowing under string lights strung for the reunion. I took a breath, my navy dress smooth against my skin, and waited as Marcus opened the door. I stepped out, heels clicking, and felt the air shift. Diane stood on the porch mid-conversation, her wine glass frozen midair. Lucas leaned against his Porsche, his smirk fading like a light going out. Robert lingered by the door, his eyes wide, caught off guard. Cousins and aunts turned, whispers rippling through the crowd. I didn't wave or smile. I stood tall, letting their stares wash over me, undeniable. Inside, the dining room was a stage, polished table, flickering candles, a spread of roast and wine that screamed Diane's need to impress. I took my seat, the chatter resuming but strained, eyes darting my way. Lucas broke the silence, his voice loud, forced. "Nice ride, Scarlett. Rent it for the night." A few cousins chuckled, but the room felt tense, waiting. I met his gaze, calm but sharp. "No, Lucas. It's a friend's. I've made a few of those since you tried to ruin me." His jaw tightened, the jab landing. Diane scoffed, setting her glass down hard. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "We gave you a chance to stand on your own." I tilted my head, my voice steady. "You gave me a voucher. I gave myself a future." The table went quiet, forks pausing midair. I leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the table, and let the words flow. "I'm a brand strategist now, working with a startup in Seattle. I've got clients, a mentor, a life I built without you." My eyes flicked to Diane, then Lucas. "Despite you." Lucas's face reddened, his bravado cracking. "You're faking it," he snapped. "You're still the same nobody who left." The insult stung, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my clutch, pulling out a folded document I'd found weeks ago, buried in an old email from a family lawyer. I slid it across the table, my voice low, lethal. "Then explain this." The paper was a trust fund statement, meant for both Lucas and me, set up by our grandparents years ago. Diane had hidden it, funneling the money to Lucas's car, his college, his life. Gasps rippled through the room. Diane's face paled, her hands gripping the table. "Where did you get that?" she hissed. Lucas stammered. "That's not, she's lying." But Robert, silent until now, spoke, his voice heavy. "She's not. I knew Scarlett. I let it happen." The admission hit like a thunderclap. Cousins exchanged shocked glances. An aunt dropped her fork. I looked at Robert, his eyes meeting mine, filled with guilt. "I'm sorry," he said, barely audible. Diane's glare shot to him, then me, her control unraveling. I stood, brushing my dress, my voice cutting through the silence. "You thought you could erase me, but I'm not your shadow anymore. I don't need your money or your lies." Lucas's mouth opened, but no words came. Diane's lips pressed into a thin line, her armor cracking. I turned, heels clicking on the hardwood, and walked to the door. The room was a frozen tableau. No one moved, no one spoke. I paused, glancing back one last time. "Enjoy your reunion," I said, soft but final. Outside, Marcus held the Bentley's door open, his nod a quiet salute. I slid in, the engine purring to life, and felt the weight of their stares through the tinted glass. As we pulled away, the house shrank in the rear view, and a question lingered. Would they ever face the truth? I leaned back, the city lights blurring past, and knew it didn't matter. I had mine. The Bentley hummed through Chicago's streets, the city lights streaking past like golden threads. I leaned against the cool leather, my navy dress still crisp, my heart lighter than it had been in years. The reunion played in my mind. Diane's pale face, Lucas's stammer, Robert's quiet guilt. I'd walked out, not with anger but with clarity, leaving their lies exposed on that polished table. No one chased me. No one called out. And for the first time, that silence didn't hurt. It felt earned, like a door I'd closed myself. My phone buzzed as we neared the airport. A text from Robert. I failed you. I'm sorry. I stared at it, my thumb hovering, then locked the screen. His words were too late, and I didn't need them anymore. Back in Seattle, the stakes were high. The tech pitch loomed, my career hanging on it. I spent the flight refining slides, my eyes burning but my focus sharp. The next morning, I stood in Naomi's office, my voice steady as I presented to the startup CEO. Every slide, every word, was a piece of the life I'd built. When I finished, the CEO nodded, a slow smile spreading. You're hired, she said. Full-time lead strategist. Naomi beamed, squeezing my arm. The relief hit like a wave, washing away the last of my doubts. That evening, I signed a lease for a modern apartment downtown. Exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the Puget Sound. My own space, my own rules. I unpacked slowly, savoring the quiet. My suitcase held the navy dress, now a relic of my triumph. I found the train voucher, creased but intact, and framed it in simple black wood. I hung it by my front door, not as a scar but a milestone. It wasn't the moment they broke me, it was the moment I began. Weeks later, I started a blog, pouring my story into words. Chicago, the voucher, Lucas's betrayal, the trust fund, the Bentley. I wrote for myself, but others found it. Comments flooded in. You gave me courage to leave my toxic family. I'm starting over because of you. The post went viral, shared across platforms, a beacon for anyone who'd ever felt invisible. Strangers from Dallas to Boston left messages, their stories echoing mine. I read them late at night, my chest tight with something new, purpose. Seattle became home. Elena still slipped me free coffee at the daily grind, though I didn't need the gig anymore. Naomi invited me to strategy dinners, treating me like family. I framed a sketch from my train ride west, a bold skyline with a figure standing tall, and hung it beside the voucher. My family faded to shadows. Robert sent another text, vague and hopeful. Can we talk? I didn't reply. Lucas posted a cryptic story, something about moving on, and I muted him. Diane stayed silent, her absence louder than words. I didn't hate them, that would have given them power. I'd let go, not of anger but of needing their regret. They'd never see me, not really, and that was their loss, not mine. I stood in my apartment, the city sparkling beyond the glass, and thought of that girl on the train, sketching her future. She'd been scared, but she'd kept going. The voucher wasn't a punishment. It was my freedom slip, a ticket to a life I'd earned. If you're holding your own ticket, a rejection, a betrayal, a moment that broke you, know this, it's not the end. It's your beginning. You don't need their permission to rise, their applause to shine, or their love to be whole. You need you. Your ticket out is your ticket in, to freedom, to power, to the person you were always meant to be. As the Puget Sound glittered below, I smiled at peace. I hadn't just survived. I'd won.